The 4 blue bottlers are down to the 3 blue bottlers now. What a choice, they tell us. Boris Johnson is very proud of the Tory party that's creaking with vast quantities of talent. Labour should be quaking in our boots, apparently. Well, I don't quite see it that way, I have to say. For a start, every single one of them supported Boris Johnson throughout all of the shenanigans that we've seen, the illegal prorogation of Parliament, the lying to the Queen about why he wanted to prorogue Parliament, the Owen Paterson affair, which I was intimately involved in because Owen Paterson was the Tory MP who appeared before the Standards Committee, which I chair, and we found that he had repeatedly peddled influence around Parliament with ministers and others and officials on behalf of paying clients who were giving him more than £100,000 a year. And Boris Johnson and all these Tory candidates decided to tear up the rule book to protect their mate, the Tory MP who'd been peddling influence around Westminster. So, and all the way through the Partygate, remember Rishi Sunak himself was also fined, of course, but all through that they excused Boris Johnson's behaviour, all the way up to the very end. And 2 of them, of course, Rishi Sunak resigned at the very last minute, maybe looking for his own future rather than anything else. The other 2 stayed on board the ship as it started going down. And of course, 2 of them, all 3 of them backed the rise in national insurance earlier this year, national insurance contributions, something Labour opposed because we just didn't think that it was right to raise taxes at this point where we're just about to go into a cost of living crisis. All of them backed it. They all voted for it in Parliament. They all went on air to defend it. But now 2 of them are saying, oh, no, honestly, I didn't really believe that. I think it's a terrible idea. I don't know who came up with that terrible, terrible thing. And thirdly, of course, I think they're a bit obsessed with all the wrong things. It feels like the Tory party these days is absolutely obsessed with statues. They do more to protect statues than they do to protect women from domestic abuse or from rape. Rape statistics for convictions and even charges, tiny percent, 1 in 100, something like that. And if you go through the candidates, all right, I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. For about 5 minutes, 12 years ago, I was a Foreign Office Minister. And I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary, came before us a few weeks ago. She just signed a new deal with Gulf states, and she was very proud of it, just published it. So I asked her, Foreign Secretary, you say that we should be less dependent on authoritarian regimes. How would you describe the Gulf states? Silence. And then a bit of kind of burbling. So I said, well, all right. Are you not prepared to say that it's a country that, for instance, executes 81 people on the same day, or for that matter, invites a critical journalist into an embassy in another country, then kills them and dismembers their body? That is an authoritarian regime? Silence. So then I said, Foreign Secretary, is there, can you tell us, because you said in your latest document on the Gulf states that you want to make sure that Britain is always standing up for human rights and will always call out human rights abuses. So can you just tell me of, when you last raised human rights abuses with the leader of a Gulf state? Well, she said, I would also have to check my diary. I can't be able to, need notice of that question. No, go on. Liz, give us a single instance. Just a single instance. Complete silence. She wants to be Prime Minister. She wants to be Prime Minister. All right. And remember when she sat down with Lavrov, Putin's foreign minister, who's been there forever and a day? She was so well prepared that she didn't even know where Ukraine ended and Russia began. I mean, you could argue, of course, that Putin doesn't know that either. But, I mean, she was completely played by Lavrov, and she wants to be Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak. He's led us to where we are now, hasn't he? He's the person who's been in charge of the economy these years. He's the person who set up Eat Out to Help Out, which was one of the daftest. I mean, it had all the kind of hallmarks of that kind of obsession that some Conservative MPs have with their own little project. Boris Johnson had dozens of them, didn't he? Bridges here, there and everywhere, and trying to build a bridge from Scotland to Northern Ireland, the Garden Bridge in London, costing millions and millions of pounds. They love all these big projects with their names on them, but it was a disaster. It was completely the wrong thing to do in the middle of COVID, and it didn't actually help the restaurants. It gave them a headache rather than help them out financially. And I think that he also ended furlough too early. And that's one of the reasons that we have problems in the airports today, because the companies just let go of too many people. And then you've got Penny Mordaunt, who has been under the most sustained attack. A Conservative was telling me yesterday he had never, ever seen such an attack on a British politician in all his days as has been going on from the Sun and the Mail over the last few days. And I said, well, it has been pretty strong, but I would just like to remind you of what they've done to virtually every Labour Party leader since the history of time began. And of course, they did it earlier on this year. But Penny Mordaunt, remember, I think she might have been sitting in this very studio when she said that Britain had no veto over whether Turkey joined the European Union. A blatant lie. And now she keeps on repeating it. Britain had... Either she didn't know how the EU worked and she's just ignorant, or she did know and she was lying. And now she's got this great idea now, which is sort of attractive in a kind of way, but it's a bit spooky, I think, which is that MPs should have their own funds to parcel out in their constituencies. Well, actually, that's called corruption. That is literally corruption. It is slush funds. It is keeping MPs in post because they can dole out money to people to support them. We got rid of that in the 19th century. And I would argue that actually all these levelling up funds, the concept of levelling up is good, but making different areas compete for the money and ministers decide where the money goes, fundamentally corrupt. But anyway, those are the three we've got on offer. Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt. What do you think? Maybe you think they are all brilliant. Maybe you have you're a fan of a particular one. Or maybe you think it's all very well, Chris, but all Labour ever does is criticise. Maybe you think Labour needs to put something more substantial on the table so that people aren't just voting against Conservatives or opposing. They're actually coming up with something that can really excite and enthuse the nation. But tell me what you think. Tell me what you think about the three candidates that are on offer. And just one other little bit to throw into the mix. Boris Johnson, apparently, this is a great... I can't believe this one. 1,800 Tory party members. Bearing in mind it's only Tory members who will be allowed to decide who gets to run this country in a few weeks' time. 1,800 Tory party members, or maybe it's more, have written in to say that Boris Johnson should be on the list. Should he be on the ballot paper? I think he's leaving disgraced. But maybe you think he's leaving with his head held high. That's what he said last week.